At 0637 on the morning of December 7, 1941, Lieutenant William Outerbridge stood on the bridge of USS Ward, watching a periscope cut through the water 1,500 yd ahead. He had been captain of this ship for exactly 48 hours. The periscope belonged to a Japanese submarine trying to sneak into Pearl Harbor. In 3 minutes, Outerbridge would order his guns to fire. In 3 minutes, his crew would sink that submarine. In 3 minutes, the United States would fire its first shots of World War II. Nobody at Pearl Harbor would believe him. Ward was a relic built in 1918 at Mare Island Naval Yard in California during World War I. She was a Wycus-class destroyer. 4 stacks, 1154 tons, standard displacement, 314 feet long, maximum speed 35 knots. When her engines cooperated. Main armament, 4 450 caliber guns, 1 forward, 2 amidships, 1 aft. She spent World War I on convoy escort duty, then went into mothballs in 1921 for 20 years. Ward sat in reserve in San Diego. Her hull rusted. Her machinery deteriorated. Her steam lines corroded. By 1941, she was obsolete. Modern destroyers were faster, better armed, better equipped. Ward was a museum piece still floating. But in January 1941, the Navy needed every ship it could get. War with Japan was coming. Everyone knew it. The only question was when. Ward recommissioned on January 15, 1941. Her crew consisted mostly of naval reservists from Minnesota, 85 men from St. Paul and Minneapolis who had never served on a destroyer before. They trained in San Diego through February, then sailed for Pearl Harbor in March. The problem with an obsolete ship and a reserve crew was simple. Nobody took them seriously. Lieutenant Commander Hunter Wood Jr. commanded Ward from recommissioning through the summer and fall of 1941 as tensions with Japan escalated. Wood was a capable officer who drilled the reserve crew relentlessly. But on December 5th, Wood was reassigned to command another destroyer that left Outerbridge. William Outerbridge was 35 years old. Born in Hong Kong, raised in Middleport, Ohio, Naval Academy class of 1927, he had served 14 years in the Navy, including 3.5 years on the China station aboard the heavy cruiser Augusta. He knew the Pacific. He knew the Japanese. He had watched them prepare for war while stationed in Asia from 1937 to 1940. Taking command of Ward on December 5, 1941, was his first independent command. 2 days later, he would make the most important decision of his career. The morning of December 7th started at 0342. Ward was on patrol outside Pearl Harbor, cruising at 15 knots. The minesweeper Condor was working the same area, sweeping back and forth across the harbor entrance. At 0357, Condor's signal lamp started flashing. Ward's officer of the deck read the message. Sighted submerged submarine on westerly course. Speed 9 knots. Outerbridge was asleep in his cabin. They woke him. He came to the bridge in his bathrobe, ordered general quarters, told the crew to start sonar sweeps. For the next 2 hours, Ward searched, found nothing. At 0435, Outerbridge secured from general quarters. False alarm. Probably happened all the time. Nervous lookout seeing things that weren't there. At 0630, the supply ship Antares was approaching the harbor entrance, towing a steel barge. A PBY patrol plane circled overhead. The pilot saw something in the water behind Antares. Small, dark, moving. He dropped smoke markers. Outerbridge was in the chart room when his officer of the deck called him to the bridge. 0637, come look at this. Outerbridge climbed to the bridge. Through binoculars, he could see it clearly. Small conning tower, cylindrical hull, no deck. Moving at 8 knots, following Antares toward the harbor entrance, trying to slip through the anti-submarine nets when Antares opened them. That was a submarine in a restricted area, following an American ship into Pearl Harbor. Outerbridge gave for orders in rapid succession. All engines ahead full. Sound general quarters. Man all guns. Prepare to ram if necessary. Ward surged forward, accelerating from 5 knots to 25 knots in less than a minute. The crew raced to battle stations. Men who had been eating breakfast or sleeping dropped everything and ran. This wasn't a drill. Their captain's voice over the intercom was different this time. Urgent, real. Ward closed the distance in 5 minutes. The submarine didn't see them coming. Didn't dive. Didn't change course. Just kept following Antares at 8 knots, focused on the harbor entrance ahead. At 06 for 5, Ward's number 1 gun fired range about 100 yards. The shell passed directly over the submarine's conning tower. Miss gun number 3 fired 15 seconds later. Range 50 yard. The 4-inch shell hit the submarine at the water line where the hull met the conning tower. Direct hit. The submarine lurched to starboard. Water poured into the hole. The conning tower heaved over. Ward raced past the submarine at full speed, then dropped depth charges set for 30 feet. 4 charges rolled off the stern. Underwater explosions sent columns of white water into the air. The submarine disappeared. Oil slick on the surface 300 its astern. Nothing else visible. Outerbridge radioed Pearl Harbor at 0653. We have attacked, fired upon, and dropped depth charges upon submarine operating in defensive sea area. The message went to the 14th Naval District Communication Watch Officer. He read it, didn't believe it. Ward had a new captain, reserve crew, old ship, probably war nerves, probably seeing things. Submarine reports had been coming in for weeks. None had been confirmed. This was probably another false alarm. The watch officer forwarded the message up the chain of command with low priority. No immediate action taken, no alert sent to the fleet. No warning issued to ships in harbor. At 0755, 1 hour and 2 minutes after Ward sank the submarine, Japanese carrier aircraft began their attack on Pearl Harbor. 183 aircraft in the first wave. Dive bombers, torpedo bombers, fighters. They hit Battleship Row, Ford Island, Hickam Field, Wheeler Field, Kaneohe Naval Air Station. The Pacific Fleet was at anchor. 8 battleships, 8 cruisers, 30 destroyers. For submarines, most crews were at Sunday morning routine. Minimal watch sections, men eating breakfast or sleeping or preparing for church services. The Japanese achieved complete tactical surprise, not because warning wasn't given. Warning was given. Ward had sunk a Japanese submarine 68 minutes before the attack began. Ward had radioed that information to headquarters, but nobody believed it. 243 Americans died at Pearl Harbor. 1,178 were wounded. 4 battleships sank. 4 more were damaged. 3 cruisers damaged. 3 destroyers damaged. 188 aircraft destroyed on the ground. Ward spent December 7 outside the harbor entrance hunting for more submarines. The crew dropped over 130 depth charges on suspected contacts. Found nothing conclusive. Spent the day watching smoke rise from Pearl Harbor, listening to radio reports, knowing they had tried to warn everyone. For weeks afterward, doubt persisted. Had Ward really sunk a submarine, or had they fired on a false contact? Some officers thought the crew had panicked. New captain reserve crew shot at shadows. Others thought they might have hit a friendly submarine by mistake. Still others believed the submarine might have escaped and Ward had simply damaged it. Outerbridge was awarded the Navy Cross for the action. Citation credited him with attacking and possibly sinking an enemy submarine. Possibly, not definitely. The Navy wasn't sure. The skepticism hurt. Ward's crew knew what they had done. They had seen the submarine, seen the shell hit, seen it go down. But without wreckage, without bodies, without physical proof, doubt remained. For 61 years, the question hung unanswered. Did Ward actually sink a Japanese submarine on December 7, 1941? Or did they fire on something else? The Japanese Navy had launched 5 submarines as part of the Pearl Harbor attack type Koho class. 2-man crew, 46 tons, 78 feet long, armed with 2 torpedoes. The plan was for these submarines to penetrate Pearl Harbor before dawn, hide on the bottom, then attack American ships during the air raid. The submarines were a late addition to the attack plan. Admiral Izuriku Yamamoto approved them in October 1941 over objections from his aviation planners. The aviators thought the submarine mission was too risky. Might compromise surprise, might alert the Americans before the air strike. Yamamoto overruled them. The submarines would attack, 5 mother submarines carried the submarines across the Pacific. I-16, I-18, I-20, I-22, I-24. They launched their midget 7 miles outside Pearl Harbor between 013 and 0330 on December 7th. All 5 submarines were lost. One was sunk by Ward at 0645. One was sunk inside the harbor by the destroyer Monaghan at 0843. One ran ground and was captured. 2 disappeared. Fate unknown. The crew's 10 men total were killed. They became the first Japanese casualties of the Pacific War. The first American caused casualties killed by Ward more than an hour before the air attack began. But without proof, without wreckage, the story remained uncertain. In 1991, 50 years after Pearl Harbor, researchers began searching for the Ward submarine. They used SIDCAN sonar, magnetometers, submersibles, searched the waters outside Pearl Harbor where Ward reported the attack, found nothing. In 2000, another search, advanced sonar, better equipment, still nothing. In 2002, the Hawaii Undersea Research Laboratory used newly acquired SID-SCAN technology. On August 28, 2002, they found it. Japanese submarine type Echo, Hyotechi class 1,312 feet underwater about 5 miles outside Pearl Harbor. The submarine was intact except for one hole 4 in diameter starboard side of the conning tower at the waterline exactly where Ward's gunner said he hit it. Perfect shot. The depth charges had caused no structural damage. The submarine sank because water flooded through that single shell hole. The discovery proved what Ward's crew had said for 61 years. They sank a Japanese submarine at 0645 on December 7, 1941. They fired the first American shots of World War II. They killed the first enemy combatants. They gave warning over an hour before the air attack and nobody believed them. After Pearl Harbor, Ward continued patrol duties in Hawaiian waters through early 1942. In October, she went to the West Coast for conversion to a high-speed transport. Her torpedo tubes were removed. Her No. 3 gun, the gun that sank the submarine, was removed and placed in storage. Troop berthing was installed. Landing craft davits were mounted. She was redesignated APD-16 in February 1943. As a high-speed transport, Ward could carry 200 troops and their equipment at 30 knots, fast enough to avoid submarines, shallow enough draft to get close to beaches, armed enough to provide fire support. She was perfect for island-hopping campaigns in the Pacific. Ward deployed to the Solomon Islands in April 1943. She participated in operations at Guadalcanal, Tulagi, New Georgia, Bougainville. On April 7, 1943, Japanese aircraft attacked the transport fleet of Tulagi. Ward fought off multiple air attacks, shot down 2 aircraft, took no damage. Through the rest of 1943 and into 1944, Ward conducted escort and transport missions throughout the Southwest Pacific. She landed troops at Sitter, Nisan Island, Emiro, Itapape, Baik, Cape Sanaper, Moradi. More than a dozen major amphibious landings. She earned 9 battle stars for her Pacific service. Meanwhile, Outerbridge left Ward in September 1942, routine change of command. He went to Washington, District of Columbia to work in the Office of the Chief of Naval Transportation. Desk job, safe, boring, far from combat. But in late May 1944, Outerbridge got a new command. USS O'Brien Destroyer No. 725, Allen M. Sumner class. Brand new, modern, fast, heavily armed, everything Ward wasn't. O'Brien deployed to Europe first. Arrived in time for the Normandy invasion on June 6, 1944, Outerbridge took O'Brien close to Omaha Beach, so close they could see German soldiers in the bunkers. O'Brien's 5 in-guns hammered German positions, supported infantry advances, helped capture Cherbourg. After Normandy, O'Brien transferred to the Pacific, arrived in October 1944 in time for the liberation of the Philippines. The Navy was conducting amphibious landings at Leyte Gulf, Ormoc Bay, and other locations across the Philippine Islands. O'Brien joined Task Group 78.3 under Rear Admiral Arthur Struble. There, the mission was to escort the 77th Infantry Division to Ormoc Bay on the west coast of Leyte. Ward was part of the same task group. She had been operating in the Philippines since October 17th, landing troops at Dinagat Island during the initial Lee invasion. By early December, Ward was conducting transport runs to Ormoc Bay. December 7, 1944, 3 years to the day after Pearl Harbor. Ward was on patrol off Ormoc Bay. She had just landed Army troops and was moving to her patrol station. The morning was clear, visibility good. Japanese aircraft had been active in the area for weeks. Kamikazes, suicide attacks, ships hit, damaged, sunk. At approximately 07:00, multiple Japanese aircraft approached the invasion fleet. Kamikazes, fall dive bombers coming in low and fast. Anti-aircraft fire from the escorts filled the sky. Several aircraft were shot down. Others broke through. One kamikaze dove on Ward. The crew opened fire. 5 min guns, 40mm guns, 20mm guns. Everything they had hit the aircraft multiple times. Pieces flew off. The engine smoked, but the pilot kept coming. The kamikaze hit Ward midship at the waterline. The aircraft's bomb exploded on impact. Fuel tanks ruptured. Fire erupted immediately. The explosion tore through the engineering spaces. Both boilers flooded. All power lost. Ward came to a dead stop. The crew fought the fires for 30 minutes, used every fire hose, every extinguisher, every bucket. The flames spread faster than they could control. Fuel oil burning on the water around the ship. Ammunition cooking off from the heat. The ship was dying. The captain gave the order at 07:30, abandon ship. All hands over the side. Escort vessels moved in to rescue survivors. O'Brien was one of them. Outerbridge stood on O'Brien's bridge, watching his old ship burn. Ward, the ship he had commanded 3 years ago. The ship that fired the first American shots of the war. Burning out of control, dead in the water, crew abandoning. Admiral Struble gave Outerbridge the order at 08:00, sink Ward with gunfire. She was a hazard to navigation. Burning, drifting, blocking the approach to Ormoc Bay. She had to go down. Outerbridge ordered O'Brien's guns to fire. 5-inch shells hit Ward along the waterline, one after another. Methodical, professional. The shells tore through the thin hull plating. Water poured in. Ward settled lower in the water. At 08:30, Ward slipped beneath the surface. She went down stern first, bow rising, then sliding under. Gone. Only one crew member from Ward had been injured during the kamikaze attack itself. The rest were rescued. 200 men pulled from the water by O'Brien and other escorts. They watched their ship disappear, watched the oil slick spread, watched the bubbles rise and fade. Outerbridge wrote the action report that night, stated the facts. Ward hit by kamikaze. Ship abandoned. Sunk by gunfire from O'Brien. He didn't mention the date. Didn't mention the coincidence. Didn't need to. Everyone knew. Ward earned 9 battle stars during World War II. American Defense Service Medal with Fleet Class, Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, World War II Victory Medal, Philippine Liberation Medal, Philippine Republic Presidential Unit Citation. More awards than most destroyers twice her size. The No. 3 gun, the gun that sank the Japanese submarine, was still in storage in the United States. After Ward's conversion to a high-speed transport, the gun had been removed and sent to a Navy warehouse in Washington. It sat there for 15 years. In 1958, Minnesota celebrated its centennial. The state wanted a military memorial. Someone remembered Ward's gun, remembered that the crew had been Minnesota reservists, remembered the first shot. The gun was shipped to St. Paul, installed on the grounds of the Minnesota State Capitol. A plaque was mounted listing the names of the St. Paul reservists who served aboard Ward. The gun that fired the first American shot of World War II now sat on a concrete pad in Minnesota. 3,000 miles from Pearl Harbor, Outerbridge continued his Navy career after the war. He commanded Destroyer Division 42 in 1945 and 46, served on the staff of the Naval War College. Commanded Destroyer Squadron for in 1949, served as Chief of Staff for Destroyer Flotilla. For in 1950–51, commanded the cruiser Los Angeles from 1953 to 1955. He retired in 1957 at the rank of Rear Admiral. Left the Navy after 30 years of service. Taught science at private schools in Florida and Washington through the 1960s. His students had no idea their science teacher had fired the first shots of World War II. Outerbridge died on September 20, 1986, at his home in Tiffin, Georgia. He was 80 years old. His obituary mentioned his Navy career, mentioned Pearl Harbor, mentioned the first shot. For decades, Ward's final resting place remained unknown. The Navy recorded her as sunk in Ormoc Bay, but exact coordinates were unclear. The area had never been surveyed. The wreckage was somewhere in 600 to 700 feet of water. Nobody knew exactly where. In November 2017, Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen launched an expedition to find ships lost during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. His research vessel RV Petrel had advanced sonar and remotely operated vehicles. The team planned to locate several Japanese battleships and cruisers sunk during the battle. On December 1, 2017, 73 years after Ward went down, Petrel's ROV found her. She was lying in 686 feet of water in Ormoc Bay. The wreckage was intact. The kamikaze impact point was clearly visible. The hull showed where O'Brien's shells had torn through the plating. Ward's final battle was written in the twisted metal. Today, both Ward wrecks rest on the ocean floor. The Japanese submarine she sank sits 1,312 feet down, 5 miles outside Pearl Harbor. Ward herself lies 686 feet down in Ormoc Bay. Both are war graves. Both are protected sites. The No. 3 gun still sits at the Minnesota State Capitol. 66 years of Minnesota weather have taken their toll. The paint peels. Rust shows through. The barrel core rods dot in 2024. The state approved funding to move the gun to the Minnesota Military and Veterans Museum at Camp Ripley. There it will be restored, protected from the elements, displayed indoors where future generations can see it. That gun changed history. At 06:45 on December 7, 1941, a street pole reservist pulled the firing lanyard. The shell flew 50 YD, hit a submarine's proms, conning tower, and changed everything. That was the first shot, the opening round, the beginning. 68 minutes later, Japanese bombs started falling on Pearl Harbor. The war everyone knew was coming had finally arrived. But it didn't start with bombs. It started with a 4-inch shell from an obsolete destroyer crewed by Minnesota reservists who nobody took seriously. The Japanese submarine crew, 2 men, died instantly when Ward's shell hit. Their names were not recorded in American records. The submarine went down so fast they had no chance to escape. They became the first Japanese casualties of the Pacific War, killed before the war officially started. Killed in American territorial waters while attempting a covert attack. Ward served from 1918 to 1944, 26 years. 2 world wars. She fired the first American shot in one and died in the other. Beginning and end connected by one man who commanded both moments. Outerbridge lived with that knowledge for 42 years after Ward sank. He rarely talked about it. When asked, he said he was doing his job both times. First time protecting the harbor, second time protecting the fleet. The Minnesota reservists who crewed Ward scattered after the war. Some stayed in the Navy. Most went home to St. Paul and Minneapolis. They worked ordinary jobs, mechanics, teachers, salesmen, store owners. They got married, raised families, lived normal lives. But they never forgot standing on Ward's deck in the darkness before dawn. The general quarters alarm. The submarine's conning tower breaking the surface. The shell hit. The warning that nobody believed. Ward's story is forgotten by most people. Pearl Harbor is remembered. The attack is remembered. But the first shot, the submarine, Ward herself, mostly forgotten. The gun sits in Minnesota. The wreckage sits in Ormoc Bay. The men who served aboard Ward are nearly all gone now, but the story remains. December 7, 1941, 06:45, 1 4-inch shell, 50 yards, direct hit, first shot, first kill. 3 years later to the day, the ship that fired it slipped beneath the waves, sunk by the man who gave that first order to fire. If you found this story compelling, please like this video, subscribe to hear more forgotten stories from World War II, comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories.